Welcome, everybody, into another great edition of The Rundown. We're talking Tigers baseball today with your two go-to experts, of course, when it comes to Tigers baseball. Brandon Word, Jack Heckman joining us. Jack, I know that you're ready. Your hat says you're ready, and I know from your knowledge we're going to have a great discussion here. The Tigers are absolutely playing some great baseball this year.
Yeah, most definitely. It's been fun to watch. A lot of key players on that roster doing a lot of great things. This is a pitching staff that's been pitching amazing. Just an overall fun couple months of the season so far.
Absolutely. We'll break down the start of the season so far for the Motor City Kitties, as well as some standout players, some guys that, haven't played as well, but you can trust in the second half. And then, of course, we're nearing that All-Star break. We'll talk about some of those players and even the All-Star trade deadline coming up. What guys could potentially be making their way to Detroit and potentially on the move away from Comerica Park. We'll touch on all that. But before we do that, big thanks to our primary sponsor here, The Rundown, Denny's Muffler and Brakes in Big Rapids. You can trust them with oil changes, tire repair, as well as other general auto repair needs, mufflers and brakes especially. Give them a call, 231-796-6335. That's 231-796-6635 for all of your automotive needs. Denny's Muffler and Brakes, a proud sponsor of The Rundown here on the Big Rapids Media Network and News Radio WBRN. Well, Jack, let's get right into it. 50 and 30, this is where this team stands. I obviously have seen a couple years of Tigers baseball. You have as well. And the history of this team does not show a team going in potentially to the All-Star break 20 games over 500 plus. This team has really made a huge step up. The Cinderella story, right? The 0.8%, the 0.2%. Last year we said, man, this team's great, but they're not quite there yet. They make a postseason run. And now this team looks to be a candidate for an deeper postseason run. And I think it's got to start with the offensive consistency that this team has showed. The first team in Major League Baseball this year to 400 runs. But you got to give credit. The pitching staff on paper at the beginning of the season was lights out. We saw them. Injuries have been apparent. We'll talk about that later. But man, some guys have stepped up. And they're just playing the good brand of baseball to grit out as many wins as you can, Detroit Tiger style.
Yeah, most definitely. You're talking about guys like Riley Green, Spencer Torkelson's had a huge turnaround season. Javi Baez, who's end up going to probably be a starter in the All-Star game in the outfield. Riley Green probably going to be a starter in the outfield. And you got Gleyber Torres, $15 million for 1 year. He's been the best second baseman in the American League, one of the best second basemen in all of the game, hitting wise. And that's a position second base where you don't see a lot of guys who hit as good rather than, 10, 15 years ago you had, or the last 5 to 10, I should say, you've had Altuve who's hit really good, but Gleyber Torres really had another turnaround season. This is a Detroit Tigers team that's playing really good right now, and that offense and you add in guys like Wenzel Perez the last end of last year. He's played amazing over his first 25 games. You got younger guys like Trey Sweeney, who probably needs to step it up to stay on Detroit before he goes there, rather than going down to Toledo. But this is a group of guys, including Spencer Torkelson and Kerry Carpenter, who are finding the bats and they are hitting the ball very hard and very well.
Absolutely. And obviously, we talked a little bit about the record of this team, right? The 50 and 30 as we stand today on Wednesday, June 24th. But I think it goes to even show on pace for 100 wins this year. The last time Detroit Tigers fans saw that was a special year of 1984. And many people know that time of year. And that time in history, Tigers faithful were having the joy of their lives. And so there's a lot of expectation with this team. There's no doubt about it. You look at where AJ Hinch has gone into press conferences, the players, they have an expectation to really play well in October. Obviously, we're still in June, turning into July very quick. But you mentioned Spencer Torkelson, what a turnaround season he's been right now. He's going to be a guy that we're going to be talking about comeback player of the year in the American League this year when it's all said and done, just based on where voting is. Javier Baez the same way. This guy was the most hated man in Detroit. They wanted him cut. They wanted him off the city streets in downtown Woodward Avenue, and they wanted him on a plane to anywhere else. But this guy has been the most favored player going to the ballpark this year. Everybody is loving this guy, getting into shortstop, playing second, playing outfield, and playing at his best. And so it's great to see those guys back. Tarik Skubal still playing lights out on the mound. He has been dealing this year. And you look at where these guys at, or especially on the other side of the rotation, right? The Casey Mize, the Jackson Jobs, right? These guys that have been banged up, right? Obviously, we're not going to be without Jackson Jobe for a little while. We kind of dealt with that too with Matt Manning and his kind of resurgence, but they've still found a way. You got guys like Grant Herter that have been able to go in and throw. Montero has been very good so far this year. And so you got to give, especially Chris Fetter and that pitching staff, a lot of credit because The offense is taking care of their job for the majority part of the year, but the pitching has to be on at the same time. And despite the injuries, they're still battling through it, even the relievers, too.
Yeah, most definitely. And a lot of these guys really aren't guys you see as those top tier prospects outside of Manning and Job the last couple of years. Tariq School was a ninth round draft pick out of the University of Seattle in 2019. Casey Mize, yes, was the first overall pick, but that's a guy who had to go through Tommy John. We didn't see him a whole lot, and he hadn't been great last year. This year, he's really turned it on and been really great. The last couple of weeks have been a little bit shaky, and he had cramps, had to be taken out of the game earlier this week. But he's been really great. This pitching staff has turned it around. And like you said, a lot of props to Chris Fetter. And there's a lot of pitchers that I think there's no reason you wouldn't want to come pitch under Chris Fetter and AJ Hinch. This is an amazing staff that's been great over the last couple years. And going back to 3-4 years ago, that was really, or 2 to 3 years ago, that was really the only great thing about this team is the pitching staff was amazing and it was serviceable. And it's been serviceable for the last couple years versus a roster that's not been serviceable. And the pitching staff stepping it up, they're getting better every single day. And a guy who needs to keep it up is Jack Flaherty. He's struggled recently, not been very great.
Yeah, Flaherty, a guy that's registered 93 strikeouts on the year, but a 5-8 record, just hasn't had the run support and has given up some big hits and big innings. So he'll be looking to really build on that moving forward. But I think especially we look at where a lot of these guys come from, right? You mentioned Drake Skubal, right? Ninth round pick, guy that was kind of passed upon coming in from Seattle. But a lot of these prospects have played some very good baseball for this team. We mentioned Casey Mize making his debut not too long ago. Still feels like yesterday that we were still talking with him as a draft pick straight out of New York, right? And going across from the green room to that first podium. But I think you look at where these other guys are. Bo Brisky's been in there. He's been able to do some great things here and there. Consistency has been a real struggle with him so far this year. But you look at where these young guys are. How about Riley Green? I mean, this guy's become a staple in left or even wherever you put him in the outfield, and he can be a good bat. He's got a big pop in that bat, but man, defensively, he is your absolute star-studded outfielder that this team's been waiting for, especially since over the last decade. When we were talking about Maglia, we were talking about some of these other guys in Austin Jackson that can show the glove. But I think it goes to show that the farm system as well has been very, very impressive. You look at where the Mud Hens are at, they're winning a lot of games. You look at the Seawolves at Double-A, they're also winning games. And heck with it, you're looking at the Caps too, right? The Caps are the top team right now down there in Single-A ball. So they're figuring out a way to win these games, and especially we mentioned the Whitecaps here in our local area here in Comstock Park, just down the road from us in Big Rapids. They got two of the star-studded guys in this system, all levels, in Max Clark as well as the young man Kevin McConicle. Those are guys that could be moved up in any minute to Double-A too. And so the farm system has really made a resurgence. And while the Tigers have had, let's just say it, problems spending in the past, development is the other way around, and they've taken that route and they've ran with it in a great way.
Yeah, most definitely. You talked about how dominant the farm system has been. Every farm system team between Lakeland, West Michigan, Erie, and besides Toledo has won the first half and clinched a playoff spot already. With the first half just ending in minor league baseball, those are three teams. Lakeland, you got younger guys, usually around the 18, 19 range. And then in West Michigan, usually seeing guys 20, 21, Erie, so on, 22, and then you get to AAA, it's usually those guys who are MLB ready guys. But this is a farm system who's been amazing, and you talked about it. The trades that have been made to build this farm system up, you're talking about bringing in Thyron Lorenzen, you're talking about Jose Briseño, you're talking about Trey Sweeney in that Lorenzen and Sweeney trade to trade for Jack Flaherty. Now you've got Flaherty back. Flaherty's numbers haven't been the same, but it's still a farm system that you're building on. And when you have an already star-studded roster, you become more amped to making trades to build that star-studded roster at holes like third base, or if you need relievers come, in 5 weeks from now, or if you end up needing a true closer and you have somebody get hurt, such as Vester Canley, you have the ability to trade those guys. And your top 10 is amazing. You ended up signing the third best international prospect last season in Chris Rodriguez. This farm system has a huge future ahead of it, and there's not really many teams that sit better than the Detroit Tigers right now with the amount of money they are able to spend with Illich and the farm system. They sit at the number one farm system in all of baseball.
Absolutely. And there's been a lot of stars within this system that have continued to make their rise up. But right now, there's a lot of good things in Detroit Tiger baseball, right? In the tops of the AL Central, very importantly, right now at 50 and 30. The Guardians, right now, as we stand on Wednesday, just about 9.5 back. Then you got the Royals and Twins right there, 11.5, 12.5. White Sox looking to find any ground possible here going into the second half of the season. But right now, they're the tops of the American League as well, and as well as Major League Baseball in terms of records concerned. You look at a lot of those top teams like the Dodgers, right, that really had our number in the first series of the year. Then you got the Mets as well, the mighty paying Mets. They're right now in that little bit of that thicket too. Then you got some other great teams in there as well fighting through. But it's really going to show that this team, if they can keep up the offensive consistency, because we've seen the pop in the bat from guys like Spencer Torkelson, Riley Green, right? Baez has shown it in those big moments, right? El Mago, right? The magical moments that he lives for. But can they keep up the consistency, right? This is a team that I look number fourth in baseball as terms of runs per game, which is a massive improvement. We were talking about a year ago, we're averaging around 5.4 runs per game. This is a team that was hovering in the 3 to maybe 4 range. That's a big time difference when you terms over 162 games season. So can they keep that consistency up? Can they see that? And especially, we're going to be talking about trade targets a little bit later on, but lower in the lineup, can you get some guys, especially, right, that catcher position has been a very highly discussed one. Dylan Dingler's been a huge asset to this team. He's provided a huge bat in some big moments. He's been great defensively, but you obviously have a little bit of concern with depth, right? We love Jake Rogers and we love his mustache, but is this a position that they look to upgrade? At the third base position, McKinstry is that utility guy. He's been slotted in at third, but there's going to be some other guys on the table that we'll talk about later on that many people wondered, hey, would we even sign them in the offseason? It's going to be very interesting, but pitching-wise, still one of the best ERAs in baseball. It was looking a little bleak, especially yesterday against the A's, where Skubal got banged up early on in that game, but they found a way offensively and they shut it down from the pen with Herder and co. So that's been a big thing. Consistency, though, for this team. They've showed it so far in the first half, Jack. The second half's got to be the same if you're going to have those deep run expectations.
Yeah, most definitely. We talked about like the pitching chaos from last year. They found a thing in the last 2 seasons to rely on. I found a stat today. They have the second best extra base taken percentage in MLB history since the 1975 Athletics.
Wow.
That means when you hit a single and you have a runner on second and they score, that is considered an extra base taken. And that athletics team, when I was reading the article today, they had an Olympic sprinter never to take an at bat and never to pick up a glove on that team that they bumped into 110 games. That's an abnormal, insane number that this Tigers team and Joey Cora has his arm like a windmill every single game at third base. And it's just this team has found things that you don't think about that they do amazing and are able to beat you taking those extra bases.
Yeah, that's a good point as well. The speed of this team is very underrated. And yeah, maybe we don't have some of the speedsters, right, that you might see in places like Kansas City or other places as well, like Baltimore, these teams that can be very fast as well, other teams that I haven't mentioned, but they find a way to move guys, especially get guys and runners in scoring position and be able to execute well. Talking about injuries, right, we mentioned a little bit here before we get into trade targets, as a lot of these injuries are going to be indicative of what Scott Harris and that crew are going to be doing at the trade deadline, right? So key injuries, right? Casey Mize is a big one, especially top part of that rotation. Not having him, not having that nasty splitter is going to be a loss for this team. But how soon can he be able to get back, right? Jackson Jobe, obviously, his season is done. That's a huge loss with him and Tommy John. Reese Olson right now is a guy that, we think are going to come back here this season, but the matter is when. We're not sure. And then obviously losing Jason Foley, right? Our big country man himself out of the reliever spot is a big loss for this team too. And so you got those guys on the mound. Parker Meadows as well has been in and out of the lineup. Matt Vierling, the same in the outfield. Obviously, we just got Moencio Perez back in that slot. That's a huge get to get him back. And not only get him back, he has been raking overall and making some huge defensive plays as well over there in right the last couple games. But then you obviously have some of those guys to fill in as well. But so we're going to be looking at some trade deadline targets in those spots, notably. But right now, Jack, in your opinion, who's the biggest loss for this team right now where we stand here in June?
Right now, I think it's got to be Casey Mize and Reese Olson or Matt Vierling. I mean, Matt Vierling hit 260 last year with 16 home runs. Those numbers don't jump off the page, but he was a serviceable player from April to June when this team didn't have a whole lot of good games. I mean, he was a great player that you were able to bump into this roster really anywhere. He was a Zach McKinstry, but a little bit slower and less athletic than Zach McKinstry is. And that's where I think the Tigers have kind of found Zach McKinstry. But Matt Vierling's a guy who you're able to, if something were to come up between Meadows, Green, Carpenter, Perez, he's a guy you can bump into this roster. And I think he's going to be a big get when he comes back very soon.
Absolutely. Many arguments meant on many different players as well for Coach Hinch and that crew was the biggest loss, but I think you are definitely on the right track. Let's talk about some trade targets, right? Many people probably want to listen to this episode saying, hey, who are we getting in July, man? Who's going to be added to this team? Well, obviously, we're going to speculate, but we're going to use as much intuition and reason as possible. And the number one name, especially mentioned third base, McKinstry has been great. Don't get me wrong saying that he needs to be immediately replaced. This is a guy that's batted over 10, 270 this year, has been really, really hot in parts of the season, especially not only with the glove, but also with the bat as well. He's a guy that you want to be able to move around as this team needs. You don't want to necessarily have him permanently slotted in and then maybe have to move around and then you have to use guys beyond him in depth where it's a little bit questionable, right? So who could be that kind of a guy that could be a really versatile infielder to use with McKinstry? How about a former Tiger himself and Eugenio Suarez, a guy that's hit 20 home runs this year, right, with the Diamondbacks right now? Arizona's not making a lot of moves overall as far as in the standings concerned. So are they going to move towards a rebuild? And that's a guy they're going to have to lock up for quite a bit if they want to keep him around. So for the Tigers, right, it's a former guy that's been in Detroit. That one seems reasonable as well. You could argue over in Toronto, just across the pond here in Bo Bichette might be a guy that you could throw in there, a big time bat when you need him. But I think that would be a little bit too cost probably for what the Tigers want. But overall, those might be some guys. Jack, who do you think the Tigers will be going after as well?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it. Eugenio Suarez would be an amazing get. 25 some home runs he's hit in Arizona, which is a little bit of a deeper ballpark. The ball really doesn't travel all that well, but it's like he's a guy who's going to go out. He's hitting home runs. The Tigers have a couple guys who are hitting home runs. Green's got 17 home runs, but he's batting 300, or not, but he's batting 300. He's batting 300, and it's an amazing thing. Torkelson's average a little bit down. Same thing with Carpenter. So he'd kind of fit in that little role. But I mean, Bo Bichette, like you said, another guy who they almost got, Alex Bregman. But like you said, I think the asking price is going to be way too high between those two guys. And I think if the Tigers are going to go deep into someone, they definitely go deep into third base. But I think they're really likely to go out and end up getting a reliever more than a third baseman.
I like where you're thinking as well. And you could argue, I just had this one up on my screen as well on my notes. Ryan McMahon is a guy in Colorado, very also similar to Alex Bregman, a guy that you know is going to have pop in the bat, that knows that they can be very well at third base. Nolan Arenado is in that conversation as well. But just the price tag, right? That's the number one thing we've been thinking about with this team. But Jack, I think you mentioned it. Reliever probably is the number one priority right now. With there's a lot of arms, but when you have the game on the line, right? No Jason Foley, right? There's kind of that missing, get down closer kind of guy, where we saw, years past, like a Zumaya type of guy, even Valverde for a couple of years before he got his inconsistencies, right? You looked at how Foley was last year closing out. That might be where this position goes. And John Brebbia is a guy, right, that might be in that conversation, right, as a trade chip for some different teams. So we will see if he maybe gets traded out. And then you got another spot going in where, hey, you got a hard throwing lefty that's thrown 104 for how many years straight and is pitching one of the best seasons right now in his career. And Aroldis Chapman, right? Maybe his next stop is in Comerica Park in downtown Detroit. He might be a good get for this team as well at the reliever spot. But there's a lot of different arguments you can make as well. Maybe they even go out and get a starting pitcher, right? Maybe somebody like Andrew Heaney over there in Pittsburgh, right? A guy that we kind of saw a little bit of not too long ago in the season so far. 13 starts, 3.24 ERA. So Olson, Job, right? Losing those guys for extensive time. Maybe, hey, we like being able to, have the chaos, right? The reliever lineup here for one of those games. Maybe they're like, you know what? Let's less stress. We don't want to really tax our relievers. So let's get one more guy. That could be a reasonable guy for reasonable price as well.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think a guy that maybe is flying a little bit under the radar, but for a lot of people, he's a dominant pitcher in Milwaukee. Freddie Peralta, the Milwaukee teams kind of struggled. They were really good the last couple seasons over the last really 5 to 10 years. They've been a pretty good roster. But Freddie Peralta, they lost Corbin Burns last 2 years. They traded him to Baltimore. Now he's in Arizona with Tommy John surgery. But this is a Milwaukee team that's lost Willie Adames as well, other than Corbin Burns. And I think if you trade away Freddie Peralta from the Milwaukee team, you're obviously going to end up going going into full rebuild. Who knows how many years Christian Yelich has in the MLB? But they also have Jacob Mrzarowski, who's an insane pitcher. He had a no-hitter through 6 innings and a perfect game through 6 innings in his last two starts. But and he's pitching for Skeens today. But I think trading away Freddie Peralta and getting him in Detroit, that would give you a Skubal. And then you have Freddie Peralta, who's potentially a perennial all-star. Jack Flaherty, if he can find his flair back, he could be an all-star. But obviously, he's not going to be an all-star this year. Too many bad starts early in the season. But yeah, Freddie Peralta, another guy, Pete Fairbanks, a reliever out of Tampa Bay. Yennier Cano out of Baltimore could be an option. Felix Bautista out of Baltimore as well. Then Jake Bird out of Colorado. And Ryan Helsley is in the same boat with Aroldis Chapman on his pitch type. He both throw about 100, 102. But those are guys who I think could be option. I think pitching is definitely the way this Tigers roster is going to go.
I think indeed. And if you want not only a really good knockdown closer late in games, and well, maybe just to get Kerry Carpenter's pop back in his bat a little bit and that contact, hey, there's a guy in Cleveland that has given us havoc for years that might be on the block soon, and Emmanuel Clase. Not necessarily saying that's going to happen, but if there's any time it could happen, maybe this is the year, right? But let's finish up with improvement areas for this team, going with their strengths. Obviously, hitting has been a major, major improvement this year. This team batting average has went up a couple ticks. RBIs and conversion of runs scored has been a huge, massive improvement for this team. But, right, third base is going to be that biggest hole that they're looking to get that production right. No Vierling, right? Jace Young was kind of going to be that guy. He's not quite there yet from what we experienced calling him up earlier this season. So that might be where we're talking the most about the trade target. Maybe a guy like Suarez, right? Maybe we do pay big bucks. Go after somebody like Bichette, Arenado, insert any other name here. But I think especially that bullpen you mentioned, Jack, the strikeout rate, getting guys out on pitches will be huge just to have less stress on that defensive liability, right? If you look at some of those guys, more hitters, less than fielders there at the other side of the corner of the infield. But if we can get some bullpen guys that can get strikeouts, right? Maybe that's a guy like Chapman. Maybe it's some of these other guys, and we mentioned like Peralta. That's going to be probably one of the biggest improvements, I would argue, for this Tigers team looking for a postseason run.
Yeah, most definitely. And picture this. It's October. Skubal just started game one. He's 7 innings in, has to be taken out. Who's going to take the seventh, eighth, and ninth? That's what this Tigers team has to really question about going forward. And if you go to a 7 game series, Skubal pitches game one. He probably pitches game four and probably pitches game seven. If you can get 6 innings out of Skubal, you got to have a dominant bullpen after that, especially playoff baseball. We saw it last year with how many low-scoring games the Tigers really played outside of the 2 games in Cleveland, at the game one in Cleveland and then game five in Cleveland. This was a team that the game that Skubal started in Cleveland, it ended up being a 3-0 game, and it was 0-0 going into the ninth before Carpenter hit a home run. This is a team that if you have a dominant bullpen, and they've had a dominant bullpen, but it's kind of fallen off a little bit, who are you going to trade for to get that next step to take this bullpen to another level? The one step back, the 2 steps forward, I think is a thing that the Tigers kind of have to use to their advantage and kind of have to build on for this next going forward into the playoff run.
Absolutely, right on it. And I think the second thing, too, we have a lot of young versatility on this team. It's a great thing to have. You got a lot of guys that can move around, right? We mentioned McKinstry, right? Justin Henry Malloy's been an asset, right? Especially with these injuries in the outfield. Perez in that argument as well. But you have to look at the consistency of these young guys, right? Carpenter's been a guy that's been massive, massive early start to the season. He's really been really cold over the last couple of games, even to the point where we've taken him out of the lineup potentially. And you look at a lot of Twitter feeds saying, hey, we got to get Carey out of the lineup for the time being. You look at guys, right, that maybe have struggled with the bats this year. You just need a little bit more consistency from those younger guys. And I think that's a big thing, right? We've looked at some of these prospects, right? How you is a guy that's where it's going to be, especially a player we're going to be talking about. You mentioned those guys at single A, double A, triple A right now. I mean, we've got guys like Baду that have come up and down, and those have just been because the consistency hasn't there. So the young guys, they can get the consistency together. This is a really dangerous team. Otherwise, this might be a team that we're going to need some of that veteran leadership, and maybe that's almost more than what we would see at the trade deadline as far as who we're going after compared to what maybe the numbers would say.
Yeah, 100%. This is a team that we know Hinch, he's all about the matchups and who's going to help this team win the matchup of winning every single at bat. This is a team that not even at bats. This is a team that likes to win every single pitch that is thrown in a game. And especially Hinch talked about the matchups. He's a guy who wants to go out and win every single matchup. He's going to go out and win every single out, all 27 of the outs. He wants to win them.
Absolutely, indeed. And that will conclude our Tigers talk for this episode. Big thanks for tuning in. Big thanks to Eagle Village. If you want a job that is impactful in the lives of youth, be sure to visit eaglevillage.org. They are hiring special positions today, so you can have that opportunity to apply and learn more information. Once again, eaglevillage.org. Thank you so much as well. It goes out to Dazos Digital. Target your target audience with the experts of Dazos Digital. Navigate the digital wilderness through the trees with the experts that can light the way. Dazosdigital.org for more information. Thanks for tuning in. The Rundown, everybody. Brandon and Jack bringing you the good stuff. We'll have another episode, same time, same place next week, whether you're watching us on YouTube or if you are tuning in live on 107.7 FM every single Saturday at 3:30 p.m. And Jack, we talked Tigers this week. I know you're really looking forward to the Lions training camp as well, which is just around the corner. So maybe we'll be talking about that here in the near future.
Yeah, potentially. Maybe sound interesting there. A couple interesting players on that Lions team.
You can say that again. Until next time, everybody, we'll see you later.